Prime Minister. Let's bring you some reaction from the Labor side of politics to this saga. Joining us live from Canberra is the Labor MP Josh Wilson. Appreciate your time, Josh Wilson. Your colleague Stephen Jones came out this morning and declared that Barnaby Joyce should resign. Is that Labor's position more formally, and why? What exactly has he done, do you think, that warrants the resignation?
Oh, hi, Ash. Well, look, I think it's time that some kind of decision was made. It can't roll on like this. It essentially means we've got government in paralysis, and there are big issues that people in Australia expect their government and the parliament to get on with. They don't want a government that's just changing channels on a sort of a soap opera from day to day.
So again, you said a decision needs to be made. Do you think that decision needs to be that Barnaby Joyce resigns? Is Stephen Jones' position on this something that your colleagues more broadly within Labor are all backing today?
Well, I think we've been clear in saying that something needs to happen. It's not just about Barnaby Joyce, the Deputy Prime Minister. It's also about the Prime Minister. What we've seen in the last few days is the Prime Minister trying to disavow his responsibility for the ministerial code of conduct, essentially sort of push the Deputy Prime Minister into the quarantine zone, into the escape pod on the spaceship, and let him make his own decision. It is a matter for the Prime Minister to act upon, but there hasn't been much sign of that, and that's what we'd expect to see. I think it's what the Australian people would expect to see.
There is a difference, though, between saying something should happen and Barnaby Joyce should resign. I'm just keen to clarify as to whether or not Stephen Jones got a bit excited on the doors of Parliament this morning and when he said that Barnaby Joyce should resign, or if that is a call that we'll be hearing today from Labor, perhaps in the Parliament.
Well, I'm speaking to you here. I'm not Stephen Jones. Stephen's obviously made his view clear. I think something needs to be done. We can't go on day after day with a sort of unravelling soap opera. It's for the Deputy Prime Minister to make a decision on one level, but it's also for the Prime Minister to show some leadership. It appears, I think, to most ordinary people that some of the circumstances aren't in accordance with the ministerial code of conduct. That's ultimately the Prime Minister's responsibility, and he can't simply try and set up some impermeable firewall and leave it to somebody else. It's up to him to show some leadership.
What exactly would be a sackable offence? You mentioned the ministerial code of conduct. Is there a specific allegation you think needs to be pursued? Because the allegation being put to Labor is that you're all just engaging in a bit of a whispers campaign here, trying to destabilise Barnaby Joyce further.
Well, I don't think that's fair. I think I'd start by saying that the fact that there was a hesitancy in the media and more broadly to inquire into a person's personal circumstances is a healthy thing. It's actually a sign that our media and political culture more broadly recognises that there are sensible limits. But the issue here is not about the personal circumstances. It's about whether or not positions were created, essentially Mickey Mouse positions, to deal with an interpersonal issue. Now, people wouldn't expect that to occur in other areas of life, in other areas of employment. They wouldn't expect it to occur in the Parliament. That's what the Ministerial Code of Conduct sets out to provide guidance over. That's the issue of concern, and we haven't heard really sort of a good enough answer on those issues from the Deputy Prime Minister, and more importantly from the Prime Minister himself.
Well, no doubt we'll hear more from Labor on this in Question Time today. Josh Wilson, this saga involving Barnaby Joyce seems to have sucked the air out of the Citizenship saga that did dominate Parliament last week. We saw Susan Lamb give that emotional explanation about her history. Now, your name has also been under a cloud. You were born in London. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, you completed your renunciation paperwork in May of the election year, but only received confirmation from British authorities of that renunciation on the 24th of June. As we know, the close of nominations for candidates was June the 9th. So when you nominated, you were still a dual citizen. Where are you at on this? Why aren't you putting yourself forward to test whether the High Court regards that as taking all reasonable steps?
Well, because in my case, and in the case of my Labor colleagues, we have taken all reasonable steps, and that's been the law in this country for more than 25 years. I renounced my British citizenship on the day I was endorsed, so it's not just that I took all reasonable steps. There was literally nothing more that I could have done. That's been the law in this country for some considerable time.
We could have tried to announce quite a bit earlier so that by the day of the close of nominations that it was all clear by that point. Again, isn't it up to the High Court to decide?
How would I have announced? I was endorsed on May the 12th. I was brought in as a replacement candidate. Until the May the 12th, I was not aware that I would be contesting the election, and I renounced on that day.
All right,
I'm
you
not
announced
sure
on that day.
how I could have done it.
Okay, no, I'm glad you clarified that. In terms of Susan Lamb, her story, of course, is very sad, it's very tragic. But again, why should she still be sitting in the parliament when it does seem clear that she's ineligible to be there?
Well, I don't think that's clear at all. What people need to remember, I think the political class needs to remember, the wider community knows full well, that Labor and the crossbenchers were prepared to put forward an arrangement that might deal with any remnant doubts held by either side. We did that in good faith. The government wasn't interested in doing that. They have come back to the parliament this year intent on a sort of a scalp-taking exercise. I don't know that that does them any credit. It's yet another distraction. I said before, we have a situation here where rather than governing, rather than the parliament attending to the very big issues that face the nation, it's a sort of an ever-revolving soap opera, and I think people are sick of it.
Well, just on a policy issue, because I know a lot of our viewers are keen for us to get back to the policy debate that surely is still going on there in Canberra this week, despite the various sagas that is getting a lot of media attention. You're the Deputy Chairman of the National Broadband Network Joint Standing Committee. We saw earlier this week the NBN Co announced pretty weak quarterly results. We know that there are a lot of problems that have been well documented. What I'm keen to ask you about, though, is after studying this at length, how big a threat do you view 5G as being to the NBN?
Well, it's a considerable threat because there are significant problems with the quality of the NBN rollout. We've seen that with HFC. We've seen it with fibre to the node, which relies on 19th century copper wire. 5G shouldn't really be a competitor with a fibre-heavy network, because a fibre-heavy network ought to have capacity, it would have capacity far in excess of what 5G can deliver, and the two things should work together. Because the government's gone down this sort of low-quality NBN path, it leaves parts of the network open to cannibalisation from emerging 5G technology. That's bad for households, but more importantly, it's bad for the NBN business case, because you're going to end up with significant parts of the network that can't return any revenue.
Josh Wilson, we're out of time. Appreciate you joining us on Sky News this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ash.